This is another essay from a student of mine who I will call the Brazilian physician, because he is a doctor from Brazil. I have a couple of medical professionals at the moment, which leads me to believe that many medical professionals agree with me concerning the fake pandemic. But anyway, let's not get involved in that. Let's get straight to the writing. So let's have a look at how this is written and what corrections I've made, what changes I've made, and perhaps even why I've made some of these changes. And I thought it was a good essay, but there are a few ways that we can make it better. So let's have a look. So one of the most challenging assignments all HR managers must endure is choosing the right candidate for the right position. Now, I preferred the right being repeated here. I know I think it sounds nice to have a certain amount of repetition in your essays. And here, what we really mean, we really mean that it's challenging. Why is this difficult for HR managers? Why is it difficult for them to choose new workers? Well, it's because it's very hard to find the right person for the right position. Yeah. And so I think it just really emphasizes that point that you need to find a suitable candidate. And it also emphasizes the point that every position, every role is different. Might have to shut my computer up there. Let's turn off the VK screen and then won't be getting that. But we've got 7 people here now. So thanks for coming, guys. Not sure if what am I doing? Let's not do that. Okay, let's get back to the writing. So yeah, I put HR managers here just because I didn't like it's very wordy if we say one of the most challenging assignments all managers must endure about HR. It doesn't sound so good. We just say all HR managers must endure is choosing the right candidate for the right position. And I have noticed that this student really likes cleft sentences. He quite often puts, is in the middle, and then he's got a long noun clause here, one of the most challenging assignments that all HR managers must endure. Yeah, that's a lot of, so he's got that as a subject, and then is, and then choosing the right candidate for the right position as object. He's done the same thing down here. We'll see that in a second. And it's good to use a wide variety of sentences. And so I'm very pleased that he's using cleft sentences. But do be careful, because sometimes cleft sentences can be quite wordy, and there may be an easier way of putting it. Now, I like this first sentence, nothing wrong with it at all. That's great. And I have got no problem with cleft sentences. I like them. But do be careful, because sometimes they can sound a little bit wordy. And I think that certainly went on further down in the essay. Okay, so let's carry on. So good morning, Mary. Thanks for coming. So nonetheless, both options are high-risk decisions. Now, I didn't like the both options here because I thought, well, what both options? I don't think we've mentioned 2 options so far. We haven't mentioned it. And so do be very careful. Remember that you've got to be pedantic in this essay. And if you say both options, it's got to be really clear to the reader which 2 options you mean. Now, I don't see option A and option B here when we say choosing the right candidate for the right position. We don't mention one candidate and another candidate. We just want the right one for the right position. And so I don't think we want the words both options. I don't think it sounds right to me. I changed this to such dilemmas because it's a dilemma, yeah, to choose the right candidate for the right position. And so I changed it to such dilemmas are high-risk decisions. I thought that was really what the student was trying to say. Now, in the next sentence, we see a mistake with conditionals. If the choice were not successful, that could result, for instance, in the decision maker's discredit or even potential substantial financial losses. He's got a nice row of 3 adjectives there, all ending in shall, potential, substantial, financial losses, which sounds nice, but I thought it sounded a little bit wordy. You might want to consider taking out one of those adjectives, maybe, but it's not wrong. It's fine. Potential, substantial, financial losses, just quite a mouthful. And so I thought it sounded better to use first conditional here and not second, because I think we're saying, you know, if the choice isn't successful, then that will result. I think we're talking about real things and not hypothetical things here. Now, you can, I don't want to say it's not correct to use second conditional. You could, if the choice were not successful, that would result, for instance. But I mean, it's an essay about real things here. And so for that reason, you might not want to use the hypothetical conditional here. You might prefer the first. I certainly do, but I don't want to say that second is wrong. It's not, but it makes this kind of a lot more hypothetical. Okay. Let's come back to this. So we've got 15 people here. So please do say hello on the chat. I will say hello back to you, and do make comments, especially about the essay. Yeah, I like relevant comments, guys. That's what I always like. Relevant comments, something about the essay, something about one of the words that he's put, some of the vocabulary that he's used, some of the grammar that he's used. Please ask. I am ready for questions, and I do like questions. Don't be afraid of asking me a question. I won't bite your head off. So first conditional, I prefer. And you could say, yeah, if the choice is not successful, that can result, for example. But yeah, I don't want to say that that's wrong. It's possible. So perhaps I'm being a bit strict here to cross it out. I should perhaps just make it a suggestion first rather than second. Okay, in the decision maker's discredit, the discredit of the decision maker. So we need an apostrophe S there. Artificial intelligence is a promising approach for selecting suitable candidates. I just felt that to tackle the issue was a bit vague. It wasn't clear exactly what issue you mean. Okay, I know which one you mean. You mean selecting suitable candidates, the issue of choosing the right person for the right job. But I think always make it really clear. And if you just say to tackle the issue or this issue, it's not so clear that you mean the one you mentioned 2 sentences back. Yeah, and so perhaps repeating it would be a good idea here and say for selecting suitable candidates. This is based on using algorithms to predict which possible candidate will be more suitable for a specific role, position, vacancy, not demand. Yeah, not demand. This word demand is used incorrectly here. And of course, don't think I'm being really vicious on my lovely Brazilian doctor. I just want to point out the mistakes. A demand, yes, supply and demand. When demand is a noun, it's used very often in supply and demand in economics. Yeah, the laws of supply and demand. Now, I don't know much about economics, so I don't know much about the laws of supply and demand. But when it's used as a verb, it's not the same as require. If you demand something, then you insist on having it. If you require something, you need it. So they are different. Okay, but do use these words for a position at a company, you know, a vacancy, a role, a position, a post, a vacancy. Even though these technologies have shown staggering evolution recently, I prefer development, staggering development recently. Although evolution isn't wrong, but I think we rarely, you know, we more often talk about development in terms of industry and technology. So they've shown staggering development recently. Some pros and cons remain. Okay, one aspect AI is prized for is, yeah, here's the cleft sentence, its capability for instantaneous methodical research for a massive database. Now, I think that's good. But I did change this a lot, yeah, and I thought it was incredibly wordy and difficult to read if you say through a massive data bank relating to all possible candidates and an instantaneous replay. I just put the instantaneous earlier, yeah, and one aspect AI is prized for is, you can see that one reason why this sentence is wordy is because of the cleft sentence, just like the sentence I've just made. Yeah, it's very wordy. And so do be aware that cleft sentences are wordy. So if you are going to use a cleft sentence, simplify certain parts of it to make it clear, which is exactly what I've done here. I think it's much clearer to just say one aspect of that AI is prized for is its capability for instantaneous methodical research for a massive database. Yeah, and I think that's nice and clear. Okay, let's see if anybody's saying hello. Hello, David. Hello, Nazarudin. Hello, Vitaly again. And hello, Sweetness Mitra. You are welcome. Okay, let's come back to the sentences. So next one, an administrator administrator would require a long period to do the same job properly. Yet require means need. Demand just does not mean need. Demand is more like insist on getting something. Yeah, it's not the same as require, which is when you need something. So an administrator would require, would need a long period of time, and not would demand, would ask for, would insist on. Yeah, and would require a long period of time to do the same job properly. Even the know-how to accomplish such work is time-consuming and laborious to acquire, usually not without some successes and total failures. If executives could be released from these stressful missions, their time could be in better use for other tasks, or their time could be spent better on other tasks. But I didn't like spend and use together, and it's because spend time is the same as use your time. Yeah, and if you use them in the same, if you've got, you know, their time could be in better use, or could be you can't use spend with it as well. Otherwise you're saying it twice. You're saying that you're spending time twice, you know, because using time and spending time are the same. So their time could be in better use for other tasks, or could be spent better on other tasks. Please remember that you spend time on something, or you spend time doing something. That's what most common with a gerund. But you spend money on something, and you spend time on something, or just doing something. Okay, a second factor highlighted is that AI, at least in theory, would be bias-free. Contrarily, now I changed this for in contrast, or I recommend in contrast. I very rarely hear contrarily. I don't think I've ever. I know it's a word, but it's one of those words that you hear so rarely that I actually recommend using in contrast if that's what you want. That's a very common, very well-known, very well-understood phrase for making a contrast, yeah? So a few more people. Good morning, Alexander, and again, Vitaly. So in contrast, humans tend to have inherent variables such as prejudice, first impression, emotional response, and personal interests. Now, why have I changed like, which is absolutely right in informal, everyday English? Why have I changed like for such as? It's because such as is formal academic English. Like is informal, non-academic English. And so don't use like in an academic essay. It's fine in your speech. In your speech in everyday English, we do use like in sentences like this one, yeah? In sentences such as this one. But in any essay, if you mean like to mean for example, yeah, if you mean for example, don't use like, use such as, okay? You can use like in other ways in essays, but not to mean for example, okay? You can use it like look like and sounds like, although look as if and sound as if would be better if you're writing an academic essay. It all depends what you have after the like. If you've got just a noun, that's fine because like is a preposition. But not when it means for example. You should still use such as when it means for example. So such as blah, 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 blah. These aspects could cause, bring about, lead to. Yet these are the words we use for cause, especially with negative consequences, with negative ramifications. We use cause, we use bring about, and we use lead to. We don't use create. Yeah, so it could cause negative ramifications, negative consequences, such as lawsuits. Now, I didn't like this from misfits to lawsuits. If we look at this from X to Y, this is, here we're making a comparison between X and Y, and that means we need to think about parallel structure, yeah? And because we need to think about parallel structure, we need to compare like with like. Now, can we compare a misfit, a juvenile, a delinquent with a lawsuit, which isn't a person? I would argue you can't, and that's what sounds a bit dodgy about this part. When you say from misfits, people, to lawsuits, documents in a court of law, yeah, or something like that. It's just not comparable. They are incomparable. Yeah, they're incomparable words. And so whenever you're using something where you can break it up in terms of X's and Y's, so some kind of correlative conjunction, something like that, you really ought to think about parallel structure. And this sentence reads fine if you just say such as lawsuits. It reads fine then, but from misfits to lawsuits, it sounded really odd to me. So staggering development. There's nothing wrong with staggering development. It works. I mean, rapid development works, significant development works. Don't like evolutionary development. Don't like that at all. Never heard of that. Fungal development, yeah, sure. But there's nothing wrong with staggering development. Okay, let's keep going on to, if these internal aspects are made public, I'm going to have to speed up, but if these internal aspects are made public, they can even damage the corporation's public image. Yeah, and here we do need apostrophe S because it is the public image of the corporation. A third point where AI has benefits over humans is understanding what. Again, we got a cleft sentence again. A third point where AI has benefits over humans is understanding what is needed for a specific position better than any manager will ever be able to do. Now, I like that sentence, but one thing I would say to the doctor is perhaps 3 cleft sentences is overdoing it, maybe. And I just say it because it does make your essay sound wordy. There will be a simpler way of writing any cleft sentence. Yeah, you know, cleft sentences are things like, it's an English lesson that I'm watching. Yeah, it is an English lesson, though. Or what I want to know is how he got here. A lot of the time you can simplify these cleft sentences, and it might be worth doing so. But I like this sentence. It's good. I don't want to put anybody off using cleft sentences. They're great. They're very interesting. No, I don't really like provoke negative consequences. No, I don't like provoke consequences, but bring about, you know, lead to certain consequences, cause certain consequences. Well, I actually prefer bring about and lead to than cause a consequence. Yeah, I'm not that keen on cause negative ramifications. Now, you've made me think a little bit longer about that, Alexander. And yeah, I do prefer the 2 phrasal verbs, or the lead to. They will lead, these aspects could lead to negative ramifications, negative consequences, or could bring about, yeah, negative consequences. They do sound better than cause. I must admit, you don't cause a consequence, certainly not. And you don't provoke consequences either. So it's a good question, Alexander, or a good, yeah, excellent point. Okay, so is understanding what is needed for a specific position better than any manager will ever be able to do. The whole picture of skills, psychological profile, and capabilities required in a specific job would, now, I've been talking about adverbs recently, guys, and when we put an adverb in the mid position, an adverb like almost or an adverb like certainly, we need it between the first 2 verbs and not between verb 2 and 3. So here we've got would be seen. So it goes between would be. It doesn't go between be seen. Yeah, this is position of adverbs. So we've done this recently, and it's good that we've got some repetition. This is a good example of a mistake that I want you to avoid, because you see it in a lot of essays. I'm sure some of these people on the chat have made this mistake before and put an adverb between the second and third verb and not between the first and the second verb. So yeah, it really ought to be would almost certainly be seen with worse accuracy by a human. Dealing with this massive chunk of information as well as accessing complex psychological traits is a complicated endeavor for an administrator. Okay, so you can see that I've reworded this and I've put the as well as accessing complex psychological traits earlier because it sounded strange to have this is clearly being this is clearly being added onto the dealing with blah, 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 as well as accessing blah, blah, blah is. Yeah, and we've got that is there. It sounds really strange to me to say dealing blah, blah, blah is blah, 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 and accessing. Yeah, that needs to be earlier with the dealing to make it clear that you've got a list of 2 gerunds, basically. Okay, conversely, AI could accurately perform these tasks. So these tasks, the tasks we've just mentioned, not those tasks, these. Most of the time you're using this and these rather than that and those, because these are the things which are very close that you've just mentioned. So something about the whole picture of skills, psychological profile, and capabilities required in a specific job. I disagree that there should be, it should be S in profile, because there's no reason why I took this to mean the whole picture of skills, the whole picture of psychological profile, and the whole picture of capabilities required. Yeah, there doesn't need to be an S there. I wouldn't say that there needs to be one. Okay, so let's keep going. Oh, we've got quite a lot more. So despite this, it should be okay, yeah, because I told you that despite was a preposition, and that means that it's followed by a noun, and this is a pronoun, so it should be okay. But I want to warn you, that didn't sound right. Despite this, in spite of all this, sounded much more natural to me, and that's why I changed it. I'm not just thinking about grammar mistakes, I'm also thinking about how to make you sound natural, and that sounds much better to me. In spite of all this, yeah, despite this, it sounded almost like, well, what's the this? I even wondered, what's the this? Whereas in spite of all this, it makes it clear all this, all of these things I've just been speaking about, it just sounded a little bit more natural to me. Okay, now I think we're going to have to stop here just because I know that these videos, if they go on too long, I have problems getting them onto my different channels. So I'm going to stop here, but then I'm going to start again. So if you all hang around, I'll be back in 2 seconds. Okay, so I'm just going to end stream and then re-stream.